narcotics and drugs, and we're going to be hearing about gangs. This will be a very entertaining as well as informative night, and I think you'll like it quite a bit. Now, last week was the first week with rides, and so is Jason here? Jason Weiner? Oh, Renee. Renee, where's Jason at? We lost him.
Maybe got,
You can be here?
No, he's got a neighborhood.
Oh, okay, that's it.
yeah,
Okay, Renee, did you ride this week?
I did.
Can you kind of give us a couple minutes of what you experienced, saw, or anything?
Oh, sure. I got down there about 8 o'clock, and I guess we probably left the police station about 8:15 or 8:20. And I was just cruising while,
Who'd you ride with?
Duncan Crawford, Officer Crawford. Big guy.
Big guy.
And, let's see, first thing was somebody who wasn't even supposed to be in Safeway because they'd been kicked out of there before for shoplifting, was shoplifting, and they had 2 of those big beers in their pocket, and the guy from the store actually held him until the police officer got there. And of course, this was on the radio, so Duncan just swung by there and made sure everything was okay. And then we went to we got called on a domestic disturbance, and we got there, and then he waited for his backup, and I guess they quieted down a volatile situation, and I think the guy got a ticket. I thought I saw him look out there, and I thought the guy looked really young, and he said, well, he was born in 58, and I said, well, maybe it's just because he's standing next to you, because Duncan's a big dude,
It's all a matter of perspective, isn't it?
And we got let's see, he wrote a traffic violation, and then we went up to Skyview, and all the kiddies in there took off out the back door as soon as he showed up, and they locked the door behind him, and he said he could see there was a lot of beer inside there. And one of the other officers came up, and they kind of drove the neighborhood for a minute, but he said he was going to go down and have Casey Richardson with quality control. They'd write out a party card, and he'll actually go back to the house where, talk to the adults or the parents, whoever lived there, and see if he can find out what was going on and see if they can not have that repeated, so.
And oftentimes, we'll go ahead and write tickets after the fact too, on things like that. If they're adults, we might even move to get a hold of the landlord and have them evicted. So it's all depending on what he's going to find from there.
So then I was thinking it was about 10 o'clock, but it was 11, and he went back to the station briefly, and I just left because I knew there was a lot of beer up at Skyview.
That's good.
Anyway, it was an interesting night.
Good, thank you.
Well, I want to know how many tickets he wrote that he shouldn't have. For unsuspecting citizens, just idling down the street.
He couldn't find you.
Just you next time we find you. David Lee, where's David?
Right here.
Was that the same party you were at?
That was the same party we were at. We actually went back later on in the night too.
Did you find Renee there?
No, but when she said that somebody else came up and helped patrol, that was us. She was in one car.
And who were you riding with?
I was riding with Prather at the time.
Ryan Prather.
And we actually, on the way there, I have to say this to all the officers, I'm amazed because I didn't even know he'd seen anything. Because I was trying to watch and pay attention. Thought we were making a right-hand turn, and we turned around and pulled into the gas station at 3rd and Russell. And he pulled right up behind the car, and I was thinking we're getting a drink. No, he actually saw a violation in the amount of time that I couldn't see anything. And he ended up getting somebody for a DUI at that stop. And that person had been at the Skyview party. We later found out when he was doing the DUI testing thing that we do over the detention center, and then there's 2 other teenagers, or I think they were like 20 and 19, that were in the car. They got MIP from someone else when they showed up, and they were all again from the Skyview party. And then after that, when we went up to Skyview.
How long did it take to process the DUI?
Oh, it took forever. It did. It took absolutely forever because the first, when they went to do it, the monster breathalyzer machine didn't work right. It wasn't working properly, so they had to stop because that's like almost towards like 2/3 of the way through the whole process. So I had to go into the other room and then start all over again. And the guy that he was processing was not as cooperative on his third attempt to use a breathalyzer. But he did process him. The guy on his, because they take the lowest test, and the highest test was 0.097, and the lowest was 0.087. And the guy was like 20. And so of course he got booked and all that. And then after that we had a domestic. The guy broke every piece of furniture in this person's house. And then escaped out the back window when they were talking to her about it. And we got to a bar fight over the press box. And the guy supposedly defending the honor of some estranged woman in the place had warrants. So he went to jail.
I can't believe how many warrants there are running around out there. We probably served 30 or 40, maybe even more a week.
And that was the quickest booking ever. You walk in, sign him in, and you walk out. That was nuts.
Some things are like that. Okay, good. Now, if you haven't signed up, please do so. Lori, you have to sign in, do you? And who's riding this coming week? Okay, excellent. We'll ask you for a little report next week. Thank you. Now, next week, we're going to be at the Latimer Station. What? Oh, yeah, you rode, didn't you? Thank you.
Sorry.
Tell us about your ride, Irene.
I was just trying to figure out what I could say to get Sean in trouble since he's not here. So.
Sean Manrassis?
Yeah, we got all this.
She rode with the street crime unit.
Yeah, and we didn't get to go to any parties, but he showed me like some night vision stuff, and we went up to South Hills, and we looked down the canyon. Ended up finding a bunch of kids playing down there that might not have been drinking, so a bunch of high school kids, but it was a good example of night vision. And they're just basically they were looking for this guy from Spokane, and so we were driving around a lot.
Can you tell everybody what the guys from Spokane were wanted for? Do you remember?
Was it something like a homicide?
Yeah,
Or attempted
deliberate homicide.
Yeah, they was a brownie, so we drove in that area a lot.
And that's what their assignment was that night, to try to find this guy. So.
Now and then there's something happening at a bowling alley, so we got the license sirens on camera, so that was cool.
When's that going to show? Or did it?
We already did.
Okay, I saw the little blurb that you made for Sean. So that's when I saw it. Next week we're at the Latimer Fire Station. Does anybody not know where that's at? Right here, I've got a little map to show you how to get to it, and I'll put the rest of them up here in case you need to find your way. Okay, last week I asked everybody to do some research on the suicide by cop phenomenon. Anybody brave enough to talk about what they learned? Mary scared Jessica Scott told me to call on her.
I will. I have to say I was kind of surprised at how recent it started up in the 1980s and most common in the 1990s. And basically what it is a bad guy engages a police officer and entices him to shoot him. They may have like a artificial or a BB gun or something that looks real but isn't, and entices, kind of dares the cop to shoot him and kills him.
Okay, David.
I can't remember the statistic, but I was amazed at how prolific it is. There's a lot of it in some of the bigger cities. You get into those metropolitan areas, and it seems to just escalate in comparison to what you find on the smaller communities.
And it is here too. And one of the hard things for police officers, especially a suicidal person, when you're called there to help this person, and then that person is hell-bent to force you, the police officer, to shoot them. And that's not why we're there to do that. We're there to help them. Guy, how often did you see that in your career?
10
Your
years
career on the street, I should say.
10 years on the street, numerous times. I mean, probably several of the most closest time I came to killing somebody was somebody trying to push it in. having a toy gun would be one thing, and that is one big aspect of it, but there's many people out there, just like active shooters, who are very much willing to try to kill a police officer and hoping, or planning that they're not going to survive the confrontation. And so, I mean, you face a very real threat when you're dealing with somebody that doesn't have any desire to live.
I remember when this first came out, we had a briefing in our briefing one night, and Marty was there with me, and right after that, we had a robbery at a casino, and we had this guy contained, and he walked out and he had a gun in his hand, and he's screaming profanities at us, shoot me, pig, shoot me, and Marty was on his right, and I was in front of him, and we're watching him and covering him, hoping he doesn't bring the gun up. Colin, would we have had the right to shoot him right there?
Yeah.
And we would have. And luckily for everybody involved, we were able to take him into custody and not have to shoot him. But it was interesting that was the first time we'd ever heard of it, was that night, and it happened right after that. It's almost like last week when you had the training and you saw moose. Did everybody hear what happened to Moose the next night?
Yeah.
And Raquel wanted to know how Moose is fine. I think that his handler's pride was hurt a little bit. But other than that, everybody is doing pretty good there.
Some don't know what happened.
Some don't know what happened. There was a truck-type vehicle stolen, and it was high-scented on a cement down by the Boone and Crockett Club. When officers got there, the guy's racing the tires, and he's trying to get off, trying to get away, and he wouldn't come out, and they got the door open, and they sent Moose in after him. And Moose went in there, and the guy got Moose in a chokehold, who was choking the dog. And so then Randy got in there, and Randy was able to get the guy to let go of Moose, and they took him into custody. But you look at the handlers, and it's almost like those dogs are their kids. And it's like, how dare him do that to my child? And so Moose is fine, and
Did he
the
get
guy's in
Biden?
jail. What's that?
Did he get a bite-in?
Mm-hmm.
He did.
He did. So that's kind of what happened last week a little bit. And I'm going to introduce now Captain Marty Ludeman. And Marty is the head of the detective division, and he will talk a couple minutes here, I guess, and then he will introduce his staff to talk about drugs and gangs.
Good evening. I'm not going to take much time because the information you're going to get from Guy Baker and J.C. Denton and Sergeant Colin Rose, I call him Sergeant Major because he is a sergeant with us and a major in the Army, so he gets a double title, Sergeant Major Colin Rose. I've been with the police department for 29 years. We're kind of kicking back and thinking about that, especially with the chief announcing his retirement, of how fast it's gone. What puts it in perspective for me is my oldest son was 8 months old when I started, and he's been on the police department for 6 years now. So it kind of really sets home. Your presenters tonight are outstanding. I have 18 people that work for me, detectives, police. I have 4 civilians. I think they're the cream of the crop. They do their job with a lot of passion. They do their job. Their job is to find facts, not to put somebody in jail, not to arrest somebody, to find the facts and let the facts say what happened in a case. And I'll tell you what, we've got 18 outstanding detectives that do that every day. Colin and JC and Guy grew up here. Colin's from Frenchtown. JC's from Missoula. Guy is 3rd generation officer. His grandfather was a highway patrolman. His dad was a patrol captain here. And now Guy is in the field. I think that's how you see this passion that this department shows to its community. Is we have a lot of people that grew up here. We're born here, and it means a lot to us to keep our community safe, and I think you'll see that. I think you felt that, and I think you'll really enjoy this evening. I'm not going to take up any more time. Sergeant Rose is going to start his presentation off here, and JC will have it. JC is one of the HIDA officers along with Sergeant Rose, so I'll have to have you put your head down so you can't see his face when he talks to you. They have the little then racks up.
Thanks, Captain. What do I need to do to wake this up, Guy?
Push the button at 3 o'clock.
Okay. There we go. All right. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about HIDA tonight. And HIDA stands for High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Task Force. And what it is, basically, is a task force is a group of different agencies that get together, and we get federal money to kind of supplement the money that we use, and there's different criteria, and basically the explosion of methamphetamine in the late 90s in Missoula is what enabled us to start this HIDA task force. You'll see here that we have the Missoula County Sheriff's Department. Actually, our task force commander comes from the Sheriff's Department. We have detectives from the Missoula Police Department, and we have Drug Enforcement Administration. I guess our special agents is what they call them. We do have an intel analyst from the Montana National Guard, an Air National Guardsman that does a lot of our intelligence gathering and is actually on a Title 32 status, so they're a full-time active duty person he's not a law enforcement officer, but he's in support of us and helps us, especially with our intelligence gathering stuff. And then we do have a part-time Montana Department of Probation and Parole officer too. Which one to advance it, Guy?
Great.
Here's our mission, and just like it says up there, to target, apprehend, and convict all levels of drug traffickers. And really our emphasis is on methamphetamine because that's been historically the drug, and JC will talk more about that. That really gives us most of the problems, the law enforcement problems, some of the things that it does. And then really what we're trying to do is to go after these drug trafficking organizations, and basically that's 4 or more people that are organized together to market their drugs. And then we do try to adjust to changing trends and threats. And where do we get our investigations from? This is not really totally inclusive, but generally we get 911 calls, a gamut of things. When people are under the influence of drugs, they don't act normal, they don't act rational, so we get calls like that. Uniform patrol observations, we get the patrol officer that's working traffic and stops a vehicle or has contact with someone, and they get training in the academy on illegal street drugs, and so some of their observations will get us involved. Also Crime Stoppers calls. We get a fair amount of information from Crime Stoppers, the ones that are dealing with drug activity or forward to us. We do get some calls right to our HIDA office, and then we do get referrals from other agencies, and then some stuff is totally self-generated from our detectives too, observations that we do make. Different methods of investigations that we use confidential informants, and these will be people that are basically, they're civilians that are working for us, and we use those a fair amount. And some people are actually working off charges where either the state or the federal prosecutor has either reduced or decided not to charge somebody in conjunction for them doing specific tasks, usually buying drugs in a controlled environment for us. Or sometimes it's just people that do it for money, and we do have a budget where we are able to basically hire some people to buy some drugs for us. It's a very controlled deal. We don't want you in the class going out and hitting the bars and seeing what you can buy and try to bring to us, but it needs to be very, very controlled, and needs to be worked out ahead of time. We have to be very careful not to entrap people, and it's kind of a science in doing that yourself. Surveillance, we do some surveillance. It's very manpower intensive. It takes a lot of time to watch things, but that is a method that we do, and just you can get a lot of information doing that. Consensual encounters, that means that just walking up to people, having contact with people and talking to them. A consensual encounter means that they can decide to leave at any time, and that's a method that we can do. The internet, there's a vast amount of information on the internet, these MySpace and YouTube and all these things. It's amazing the amount of criminal activity that people put on these, and that's available for us. Looking at different utilities, there's some of this is kind of open source information, some things they can look at. There's some of it does require investigative subpoenas, and that's something that in the state of Montana has to be signed by either a district court or a Supreme Court justice, and it's similar to the information that you would need for a search warrant. It isn't obviously as invasive as a search warrant, but you do have to have probable cause to get that, and it has to be an application done that is signed by a judge. We do, one of the utilities that we do use, that I talked some with Chad Bauer, and that's garbage. People throw away garbage, and some of the garbage that they throw away contains residue, contains leftovers from their drugs, and that garbage belongs to Allied Waste, and Allied Waste consents to let us look through that garbage if we have need to do that, and so that's one thing that we do. Financial records, there's a lot of money to be made in drugs, and especially at some of the higher levels, and these people, you know, they're not paying taxes on it, they're working to try to hide it, and that's one of the things that we can use with especially our federal investigators that have some good assets. They have some forensic analysis in the financial arena that are able to look at financial records and tell where this money goes. A lot of it is going right out of the country. Some of it pays for terrorism. And then wire and pen, wiretaps. Montana has never done a wiretap, or there hasn't been a wiretap done in Montana. That is something that has to be signed by a federal magistrate, but we do have the capability. Again, we'd have to go through a federal magistrate. If we did have it, it takes a large operation basically to justify doing that, and it's very manpower intensive to do that. One of our DEA agents has worked on a few wiretaps in another area where he was. And then PEN is basically keeping track of phone numbers that people call. It's not as invasive as a wiretap. It's actually listening to conversations, but it is something that does require subpoenas to do that. But those are different methods that we can do. Some of the yes, ma'am.
Well, with methamphetamine, there's a certain amount of chemicals that they buy in order to do the meth lab. Do you also monitor the stores and purchases? And
we do somewhat, and we will get some calls because any of the precursors or the ingredients for methamphetamine, if people are buying a bunch of iodine and they don't have any legitimate use for it, or different things, that will raise flags, and we will investigate those reports. And people stealing cold medicine, now you're limited to how much you can buy, so people try to steal cold medicine that contains pseudoephedrine, which you need to have. And JC will talk a little bit more about how they actually make meth. But yeah, those are ways that we do some investigations also. Some of the different prosecution tools that we do have the state court, basically through the state district court and federal court. The federal thresholds, or the minimum amounts for drugs, is generally higher than for state, but a lot of the rules of evidence and search and seizure, in my opinion, are easier in federal court. Some of the seizure rules are easier in federal court. We kind of like it when we're able to make cases go federal, and that's kind of a generality. And then also state and federal civil property forfeiture. And like I was talking a little bit before, there's a lot of money to be made in drugs, although the consequences, of course, are bad for it. But they're not paying any taxes on that. All that's under the table. But when we get involved in these investigations, as we're able to figure out proceeds that they have gotten illegally from from their drug operations, we're able to seize those, and we can do that either in state civil court or in federal civil court. And some of it can be done either at the, either civil or criminally. I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. But anyway, the burden of proof on us is easier in the civil arena than in the criminal arena. The criminal arena, in order to see something, we have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And for civil, we just have to, the preponderance of the evidence has to be that it was gained from criminal activity. Here's some of our stats from 2007. We had 155 felony arrests. You see most of those were for methamphetamine. The second is pharmaceutical. JC will talk again about pharmaceutical. We have a lot of problem with people abusing prescribed drugs. The different narcotic analgesics, and it's a big problem. People think because it's prescribed it's safe, but that's only if you're taking it when you need to, not to get high or whatever, and they're taking it the way they're not supposed to. And so those are different things that we deal with. Marijuana, cocaine, hallucinogens, and the different club drugs, ecstasy, MDMA, some of the date rape drugs, things like that. And then some of the other, we've had a few conspiracy, property subject to criminal forfeiture, which is an offense in and of itself, and a little bit of manufacturing. We don't see near as much manufacturing anymore, especially with the methamphetamine, just because those precursors are harder to get, and those add up to about 22. And then here's the street value of drugs that we seized in 2007, and kind of see that we got just a little bit of everything out there. Yes, ma'am.
So what do you do with all that?
Well, it's held until it's completely adjudicated, and then the courts order it destroyed. And you'll see we've got some displays back here you can look at on your break, and there's some of that has been adjudicated by the court for us to keep that. A small amount is kept for training for the canines, but the lion's share of it, when all of the court stuff is done, which can take up to 3 years for all appeals and everything else, and it's ordered destroyed, and it's usually burned to do that, and not half a gram at a time burned.
Now, is that seized and still being prosecuted, or is that seized and has been prosecuted?
It's kind of a combination of both. There's a lot of this is just what was seized in 2007. So some of it, people go in, arrested on Friday, go in Monday, plead guilty, it's done. Some of it goes for up to 3 years. So here's some of the assets that were seized. These are the assets that were seized in 2007. Again, not all of these have been awarded to Missoula HIDA, but there's cash, vehicles, real property, weapons. You can see the weapons. I'm a firm believer in citizens owning firearms. I have a problem with drug dealers, especially meth and stuff with weapons. It's a bad combination for law enforcement. But these are different assets that we've seized, and then it has to go through all of the adjudication through the courts, and then stuff that is that we do end up being able to keep, if it's something that can be put right into service, like JC's and mine's vehicles that we're driving right now were seized vehicles, and they're kind of worked over, and we use those. Some of it gets divided up amongst the different agencies. There's actually a board of HIDA that has the sheriff, the police chief, has a county attorney on it, has the special agent in charge of the DEA. Who am I missing, Marty?
That's about it.
With the HIDA board, okay. So they kind of divide it up. All right, I'm gonna, barring any other questions, I'm gonna turn it over to the real expert, JC.
Well, kind of. It's weird. I've been doing this job now for 2 years, and this is how I look when I go to work. I'm not invited to Christmas dinner anymore. My parents go in public with me, and this was a lot longer, a couple months ago. My name is JC Denton. I've been in the drug task force for now 2 years. I've been a detective. I was about 2 years and 1 month. I moved quickly over to drugs. I thoroughly enjoy it. It's one of the jobs truly we can make a difference, be very proactive with. And it's also something that we don't always bust people. You know, our whole goal is if we get someone into treatment and not have to deal with them 6 months from now, that is a success for us, not necessarily have them sitting in jails. If you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me. I have a ton of information, so we'll kind of cruise right along, but I welcome any questions. So the commonwealth drugs, they're prevalent in Missoula. Colin kind of explained a little bit. Again, marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine. We do see a lot of black tar heroin. It is a black tarry substance. Like again, I would check the boards back there and see it. It's not what you would think heroin is. Like on TV, a lot of times you see China White on the East Coast. It's a powder. It almost looks like cocaine. We just don't see that on the West Coast here. It's very expensive, and it just by the time it gets here, it's used up. So, psilocybin mushrooms is basically the mushrooms that you can find out in nature that I'm sure some herbal people would be able to ingest. Prescription drugs is a huge problem. I could probably do a 2-hour lecture on the prescription drug abuse in Missoula and as a society type problem, right along with the doctors and patients. MDMA is ecstasy. It's basically an amphetamine-based drug, so a lot of the same effects you get from meth, some alters, is the same you get with ecstasy. LSD, we do see a little bit of it. I think we miss a lot of it because it's basically in droplet form, water form, so a lot of times they'll put it on sugar cubes or hide it in other stuff, and unless they tell us that they have LSD, it's a drug you're just not going to find. Marijuana. Some common street names, I'm sure everyone's heard of these. It's kind of interesting. Today I actually did an undercover operation where I delivered half a pound of marijuana to someone. I was wearing a shipping depot type uniform, so it is out there. We do deal with a ton of it, excuse me. Something to consider too is we still do very large grows. A couple have been covered in the media, and people think marijuana is a very benign drug. It's an herb. There's no violence associated with marijuana. Quite the contrary. Just the Grizzly case everyone's read about. That was a pure case of robberies over marijuana. And also every big drug case we've done, about 5 pounds plus, we've seized assault rifles, shotguns, and some heavy-duty weaponry that you don't want to see on the street. Some of the common marijuana hazards, again, these are kind of obvious if you've ever seen someone that's a heavy marijuana user. The memory and the attention is very common. The lower inhibitions is kind of where we talk with and we try to approach children. It may be an herb, it may not have the same effects as cocaine and methamphetamine, but when kids do smoke marijuana, it does lower inhibitions, and it also makes them very susceptible to other things. That's where we kind of get into the gateway type thing. You just never know what you're going to get with marijuana. You don't know how it's grown. This isn't a drug that is grown on some farm. A lot of these guys use whatever pesticides they can get a hold of, so we've had a few people get sick from bad weed. And also, this is kind of interesting, the THC content. I actually interviewed a hippie guy who won't smoke marijuana anymore because, not because he's reformed, it's because back in the 70s, the THC content was somewhere around 45 to 60%. Now we're getting up ends of 80 to 90% THC content. So the older kind of 70s crew, they get too high and they can't do anything. So they like to smoke and play their banjos. Again, just some legal stuff here. 60 grams or greater is the felony scale. If you can imagine a Ziploc bag, like a freezer bag, about half that would be approximately 60 grams. Then when you're cultivating it, growing it, one live plant is considered a felony. And it's rare you ever get one live plant. It's probably 100 or 200. It's common paraphernalia. This is the kind of stuff that you can go to a couple different stores in Missoula and buy because it's used for smoking tobacco.
So, is that, well, didn't the Vol get shut down because it was a head shop? But there are other head shops around Missoula. But that's.
The Vol was a federal case, that was kind of an
Oh,
interesting.
okay.
case,
But, so the other ones are getting away with it because it's tobacco? They say it's tobacco, but we all know they're head shops.
They sell licenses, but for it to be considered paraphernalia, it has to have burnt marijuana residue within the bowl when you sell, or it has to be used to package marijuana or distribute marijuana. So you can go buy a pipe, and the premise is that it's used to smoke tobacco, but, what do you think?
Has a marijuana leaf on it?
What's that? Yes, yeah, marijuana leaf on it, that's, so it's a lot of tobacco pipes, that's all. But that's the premise of why they can sell it as just a pipe, not as drug paraphernalia. And Colin talked about methamphetamine, not sure why it wrapped around like that, but it is a problem. It's definitely a West Coast drug. Some common terms for meth: the meth, crank, speed, crystal ice, go fast. We've heard a couple recent ones, homespun. It's truly a bad drug. It's basically a pseudoephedrine where you cook off the byproducts, you're left with an ephedrine molecule, and you crystallize that molecule and alter it to get the amphetamine and the methamphetamine. They can make it here also a couple different labs, or most of the meth we used to see is from the big super labs down in Mexico, and it would come up the West Coast. Usually transit through I-90. That's why Missoula is heavily hit with the meth problem, why we actually have a HIDA. Is the I-90 corridor. We see a ton of it heading west to east. I was actually in Cody, Wyoming last year, helping the Hells Angels rally, so I'm kind of excited to see some of my friends here that are coming out this year, maybe. But the common thing that's called crank is the Hells Angels started transporting it back in the 70s and the 60s in the crankcases of the motorcycles, and that's where they used to hide it, so that's where the original term crank came from. So again, kind of legal things, a residual amount, any testable amount of methamphetamine is a felony. So that basically means if there's powder inside of the pipe they actually used to smoke it with, we can charge that as a felony. A lot of states have adopted a minimum of 0.5 gram, but in Montana we're still right with residual amounts. I think it's a good idea. It gives us some leniency. We can twist people with a little bit and help them. Try to get them to cooperate. But again, any distribution amount is a felony, and then obviously any manufacturing of methamphetamine is a felony. And also possessing precursors is a felony. And you'll see some here if we got the next slide. Nope. Some common ways to use meth. Bad drug. I mean, it's said you'll see the chemicals here that they're household chemicals that taken alone by themselves will probably kill you. But for whatever reason, when they combine them, it's a terrible drug. Okay. So these slides are going to be a little graphic, but it's stuff that we deal with and it's problems associated with drugs. Again, this NS, we're not using the names, but this is the actual crime scene photo. They were both shooting up one night. They were friends. They had arguments, and NS dared his buddy to shoot him, and through the course of being high and not seeing things correctly on meth, he ended up shooting his friend. So, and these are two friends that are doing this. So you kind of see what the drug does. And that's with two friends. Imagine if it was someone that's approaching them in the street, or a police officer, or if they're trying to break into some place to get money to buy more meth than someone else that confronts them. Violence is hand in hand with methamphetamine. Again, a combination of polydrugs is another common thing. Seems like it's never just one drug, it's alcohol on top of other drugs. And this gentleman was found in West Broadway Motel. These are some pictures of, you guys may have seen, these are common, you see them on the internet every now and then, but kind of gives you an idea of what meth does to people. I mean, it's amazing. It's this chemical, basically you ingest the chemical and it tries to leave the body, so that's why a lot of times you get meth sores. It's the chemical leaving the body, and also people have the delirium that there's bugs crawling the skin. And question? No. Oh, good. Is there any questions so far? Okay. What's scary is some of these pictures, these aren't what you consider street junkies. A lot of these are middle-aged women who probably started out as housewives and got hooked into it.
What are other drugs that have similar, the look? I mean, if you look at someone, would you be able to say meth versus any other drug?
Crack cocaine would be similar. You get some of the same type of looks. Long-term crack use, maybe heroin, but nothing to the speed of meth and this quick.
It's the worst.
Yeah. To give an instance with, I mean, meth, I've talked to people, one girl who stayed up for 27 days straight while she's binging. I mean, that's no sleep, 27 days straight. Imagine what that does to your body. Just take away the drug, just being up for 27 days straight is just, it destroys you. And then you add to the effects of the drug and the negative effects of the drug. And it's those the time, the end of those 27 days when people start to get scary. Again, that's just 8 months of drug use. Look at the sunken cheeks. And this is a pretty common one. I've seen this in there quite a few times. This is 10 years and she died shortly after that last picture. I think she was 30s, early 30s when that first picture was taken, so kind of gives you an idea. She's about 40 when that last photo was taken. And again, this is the slide I was talking about, the chemicals. If you have Coleman fuel, obviously we're not going to kick in your door and bust you if we're going out camping the next weekend. Coleman fuel in large quantities with phosphine gas and a lot of pseudoephedrine. Okay, yeah, we definitely need to have a talk, but the chemicals by themselves aren't illegal, but combining these chemicals is what we consider precursors, and that is illegal. Because obviously no normal person is going to grab these and start making meth in your backyard. And what's interesting, when I first started on the job, is I heard the term meth lab, and the first thing I think is like a chemistry lab. But it's not true. The one picture on the left there, that is a meth lab. Basically, it's just the contraption that is used to make methamphetamine. It can be simple as 2 water bottles taped together with tubing, or you see on the far right, that would be what I called like earlier the super labs that are down in Mexico that create pounds of the methamphetamine. And also the big problem is a lot of these are mobile. Like this was a mobile lab that was seized, and you rear end this car, you're going to be exposing chemicals, possible explosion. You get out to see how the next driver is. You're exposed to a meth lab. Also, our traffic unit and our investigators are also possibly exposed. A lot of these are booby trapped because they want to protect their product. This is a simple meth lab. You know, a hot plate with oil and a mason jar. You can kind of see where they're boiling off the drugs. The oil is what they actually keep and crystallize. The binder is what's left on the bottom there. This is a super lab down in Mexico. And we're talking like, again, pounds of methamphetamine. The normal usage would be half a gram or less, so you can kind of get an idea of how much a pound is. And what I hate about methamphetamine most is the needle associated with it. That's always something that scares me to death. I was a paramedic before I became a police officer, and hepatitis C, AIDS, and the bloodborne pathogens is always something that's in the back of my mind, especially when dealing with these needles, because you can be as careful as you can, but all it takes is one exposed needle to poke you. And this is dealing with not only police officers, firemen. These people don't throw away their needles properly, so they throw them in the trash. So simple as the guy that's emptying the trash throws a trash can up, could be poked with a needle. Children, I mean animals. It's just a nasty, nasty drug, and everything associated with it. Like I said before, this wasn't in Missoula, thank God, but this was seized along with the meth dust, and that's some heavy-duty machinery there. And like I said, booby traps, pipe bombs are very common. This is a lab that the guy had up in his attic of his apartment. As you can see, as it was he's probably using like Sudafed, the reddish color pseudoephedrine. These aren't chemists. Okay, these are guys that are probably, you know, high on the drug themselves. So you can see the result.
Wasn't that lab in Great Falls?
I believe so. Again, flare-ups are very common. This particular guy got his just due. He was cooking up in the High Line. If you guys remember what some of the liquids there, toluene, you guys ever seen that clear liquid? The lab flared up and his wife grabbed what she thought was water, and it being toluene, and threw it on the lab and it torched in. Again, another lab explosion. These are the worst. There's always kids associated. This little guy ended up dying shortly after third-degree burns. This little girl, the chemicals were kept in an orange juice bottle. She drinks orange juice, she grabbed the bottle and drank it. She actually ended up doing very well. She was removed and placed in foster care. Cocaine, again, we're starting to see a big time influence of cocaine in Missoula. With methamphetamine down a little bit, with availability to it, cocaine is on the rise. I've also heard of people cracking it out and smoking it. Basically, you're adding baking soda to it to make it a smokable form. Bad drug. Again, black tar heroin, we talked about it a little bit. It's a real viscous, black, ugly thing. Again, there's some of it back there. You can shoot it or burn it and smoke it. Kind of like that. Problem with heroin is you never know the dosage, and how heroin reacts against the body is it slows everything down, so people overdose on it and knocks out the respiratory drive. And this guy was a heavy user, and he knew how to use drugs, and he knew how to use heroin, but he was depressed and he shot just a little too much up. Unlike this guy, who was a very inexperienced user, so he probably didn't know how much he was actually injecting, and it's that fast. He injected it, knocks your respiratory drive out, and died right there. Mushrooms, it's basically a hallucinogen. I think some of the cool things about this is the seeing odors and tasting colors. Do that. But again, some of the side effects with mushrooms. And again, you can find these out in the wild. Just don't eat them. Ecstasy, again, we're starting to see a little more of this as Missoula gets larger. We hear every now and then about raves and other stuff. We've actually caught some kids with some ecstasy on campus. Not a whole lot, but we do hear quite a bit about it. So it is out there, and I think as Missoula starts to get bigger and we have a more influx of outside influence, we're going to see more of these club drugs, vitamin K, ketamine, ecstasy, and the rave drugs. The cool thing about ecstasy, I guess, talking with people, is the enhanced sensibility as your skin does. It makes you feel more tingly and more sensible to touch. That's why they call it kind of a sex drug. Does anyone have any questions? I was running a little short on time and kind of don't want to cut into guys as much as I want to. But go ahead.
I don't know if I'm going to use the right term, but in Missoula, there was that initiative or referendum about marijuana.
I was hoping I could torch past that about something like that. So,
has that affected how you investigate? Or?
No. Most of the smaller quantities of marijuana, the drugs we get, are secondary to other arrests. We don't, as a drug task force, we don't go out looking for small amounts of marijuana. Probably the smallest amount we deal with is in ounce quantities, but mostly up with pounds and that type of large quantities. We as a drug task force, focus on large distribution groups. So as far as a task force investigating it hasn't affected us.
There was some concern, though, that if you were to investigate it, or at least it was reported that you would lose federal funding. I mean, is that real, or is that?
Well, there was a case, I don't know if everyone saw in the paper, where female who had a medical marijuana license was getting marijuana shipped in the mail. And the feds don't reckon, it's a state law or a local initiative. The feds don't recognize the state law, and there's that whole issue of state law versus federal law. We're getting federal money for HIDA, so it hasn't affected us yet.
That whole initiative was recommended, it wasn't a mandated thing, and it was for the county, not the city. Part of the problem that I had with it is, we already put our priorities in marijuana, misdemeanor marijuana pretty low. It's like JC said, we don't go out there and really go after a whole lot of misdemeanor marijuana offenses. However, having said that, is you'll find that very rarely do we make a cocaine bust or any other big bust that there is marijuana involved. And this was a smokescreen to try to say that this will help the police to prioritize for the major crimes, murder, rape, robbery, things like that. As you can see, we have specific detectives that is their job. Take away the marijuana, they're still out there looking for the heroin, for the cocaine, the methamphetamine. They are not going to be pulled off of that and put in investigations for rape, murder, and robbery. I thought that that whole effort is a very misguided and irresponsible way of trying to affect what the society looks at as marijuana and marijuana use. I had a pretty good dialogue at Walmart one day with a guy, and he said, "Hey, I'm just here getting signatures for I got to put food on the table for my kids." And I said, "I just really hope for your sake your kids don't grow up to be drug addicts." Because I said, if you do, look in the mirror and you can thank yourself. And I truly believe that. As it is, it's a recommendation, it's not something that we're mandated to follow. But if it was mandated, Bill, you're absolutely right, it had a clause in there that we could not accept any money or financial aid from anybody that did enforce marijuana, which means federal government. And that's not just an investigation of drugs, it would be for everything. School resource officers or anything. That's how broad it was, if it would have been mandated.
That's what I was curious.
Do you have much, looking at the number of arrests you had in felony arrests of drugs, see, pharmaceuticals and meth were the leaders, and then pot and cocaine were behind it. You see much of a demographic breakout in that? As far as not necessarily in always in sales, but in users?
No, I mean, it
So
could be
it
anywhere
covers-
from the 18-year-olds to 50, 60-year-olds. If anyone read that independent article about the granny that was running meth up from, that was one of our DEA agents was lead on that case, and that's just a classic example of, the demographic would be 8 to 80, especially with the pill stuff. I mean, that can breach all walks of life, all socioeconomic. I mean, we've dealt with people that make six figures that have a pill problem, and that's just kind of something that we're trying to concentrate more. We're actually trying to get a diversion officer to investigate pharmaceutical problems solely, and there could probably be 2 diversion officers just solely doing that in Missoula County alone.
One more question regarding, especially pharmaceuticals. Has the availability of online sales of pharmaceuticals affected it at all? What effect have they had?
We haven't seen a whole lot. From what we're seeing is still script fraud and pain clinics that are probably our biggest problems.
Okay.
They were initially established, I think, for good. They weren't established to distribute drugs on the street. They probably had a good intention to begin with, but people are taking advantage.
We're seeing an awful lot of daytime residential burglaries where people are going in and the only thing they're taking are the prescription drugs. And we're seeing an awful lot of that. How many do you have this morning we reported? 3?
3, yeah.
3 in Missoula. And this is, one guy said, I left my house for 5 minutes, came back, somebody's been in there. And they're running right to the medicine cabinet. People show up, say, hey, Al, can I use your bathroom? I'm really not feeling well. But you're a nice guy, so you let him in, and 2 hours later you go to take some kind of a pill that's prescribed you and it's gone. And that's real prevalent. And remember the first night I talked about how many overdoses in the ERs and how many people are dying each year from prescription abuse. And let's see, one of the TV stations, if not both of them, are going to be doing a story. You were going to be that way, Casey. And she's going to be involved with talking with at the state level with the feds. And it's a huge problem right now. It's probably one of our biggest up-and-coming problems that we're going to have. So now, we're going to have JC here, take time for a break. We'll come back, Guy will be here. Look at the displays we have, ask some questions, have something to eat, and get a pop or something, and we'll take 10, 15 minutes break. Thank you.
I'll be in the back too if you guys got any more questions I can point out. What did we stand?
No, but they're.
Yes, they do.
Explain a little bit, 15, 18 years now?
18.
18, doesn't seem that long. I knew him when he was in high school. We chased him around. But Guy is a very good presenter. He's nationally recognized in this field as a gang presenter. Are you the vice president?
Senior Vice President, yeah.
Senior Vice President of the Northwest Gang Investigators Association. And what that basically is a network of gang investigators that get together and keep current on gang members, and I'll let Guy get into that. But Guy you'll enjoy this presentation. He's nationally recognized in his field, and he does a very good job.
Thanks, Marty. Rusty wanted me to show you this video to maybe make you laugh. I think it'll probably make you laugh a little bit too, but this is a problem kids have when they're sagging and begging so much, you know, with their pants. Watch the second suspect.
One man that I had,
Watch his pants, it goes down.
falling off, he kept pulling them back up, and he got the cash drawers, and when they went to go out the door, the one with the gun went through the door first, and as the door came to, it hit the cash drawers, and all the money went everywhere in his pants. He let go of them, and they fell down around his ankles.
That's a problem there, yeah. So anyway, we're going to cover a ton of ground, and I talk fast, and we don't have much time, so if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm going to give you a lot of information, and I think there'll probably be more than a few of you a little surprised when we're done today, because the old adage, we only know what we know, it can't be stressed enough when it comes to gangs, because if you think about it, you, the average citizen of Missoula, has a routine, and you get up the same way every day, and you travel to work the same way, and you come home and you shop at the same store, and you might go out to eat or go to a movie now and then, and you're usually at home in the evening and going to bed at 9 or 10. And you're basing your perception of what's going on in Missoula on what you experience, what your friends tell you, or what Jill Valley tells you. And Jill Valley and your friends and you don't know everything, so perception is reality to each of us, but again, I can't stress it, we only know what we know. So we're going to talk about gangs nationwide, bring it in regionally, and then locally, so you'll probably have some questions. I've been working the gang presence in Missoula since its inception in 1991, and for Missoula to say that we have had a gang presence going on 16 or 17 years that has not developed into a gang problem is very rare for a city, a small city in America, because as you're going to see, hundreds of cities have faced that non-residential threat, and they weren't able to overcome it, and the window of opportunity slammed shut, and today they have a gang problem. So we have a gang presence, and we have had a gang presence. So I'm going to open up with a video here. This is gangsters from all over the Northwest. There's 25 pictures in here from Missoula. Kind of get you in the mood a little bit. There are going to be some cussing and a little bit of gore, and I will preface it before we get there. So cover your eyes. Nothing in this video.
I'm pushing big body, can't stop me. Put a 9-8, got to sell it, need copy. I'ma grow slow, puffin' on the optical, hit the snow. I'ma go real slow, puffin' on the optical. I'ma let the grass green, being a good team, one more control, big green, and now you just team. Baller, shot caller, 20 legs, only a baller. Caller, get lit tonight. Switch the room, tight, got spread eyes. Highway, make it run it up highway. But it's got to be a bad way. smoke out in my nose, your eyes get froze. And you see my load, carry red to go. In my top 9 show, hit it, my remote, sit it, in my shit, residential retail with that AMG kit and no quit. As I get high, from JC to H down to North and South Side. Now we worldwide, cause we outside. That growing killer can't keep it high. 187 thugs, oh yeah, we got love. Blowing sticky green with flow, and that bug. Wanna be a baller, shot caller, 20-inch blades, only Impala. Caller, get lit tonight. Switch a rope tight, got spray my eyes. I hit the highway, making money the flyway. But it's got to be a better way, a better way, a better way, yeah. Back down south, rolling niggas on blocks, most really high class, side with short stop. Ain't that for real? So tell me how you feel. To make $1 million, I'm my first record deal, short stop. Putting up your motherfucking deal. Really don't give a fuck, 'cause I ain't getting on no bill. Cold team without seal, just a trip without ride. Something without, baby, it's outside. We on the fucking reason, expedition navigators. That's how we be riding. Alley at a suitcase, put it in the face. And that's for real, sound harder than the kid. Hit the clear the wheel. Now hit the too low, youngster be a thug. So thinking we could good, I'm out with my good. My blood in the crowd, you know what's going down. Representing H-Town, I touch them on my sound. I'm here, baller, shot caller, 20-inch blades, only Impala. Caller, get lit tonight. Switch a rope tight, got spray my eyes. I hit the highway, making money the flyway. But it's got to be a better way, a better way, better way, yeah. I got to get better, man, they got to move on. Switch from Motorola to a prime cold phone. Broken 2 phones, they ain't no dope pictures. Used to call my scope, now these hoes on my inches. Had to get older, man, it got colder. I done got gone, got a chip on my shoulder. 6 in Kuwait, got beats to Pakistan. Wasn't understand, virtually had the caravan. Double dose mobile flow, they can hold the grind. Every time I come in out here, they want to sign me. Got the little wheel diamond, good little queen. Blades in the pen, they can't forget the pen. The movie diamond moving, I'm watching on the movie. Drop the top of sky, then you know I'm music cruising. Swerving and I'm swerving, man, it's getting hot. My last name in, I'm about to tie them off the lot. They don't take baller, shot caller, 20-inch blades, only Impala. Caller, get lit tonight. Switch a rope tight, got spray my eyes. I hit the highway, making money the flyway. I'm hauling every day, all day. Ain't no way, boss can stop. Cause I slide to the neighborhood, chop, chop, chop. Get it straight to the top. I hold it later, we about to go to a shop. So time to dead here, till the pen once again. Beat the business I seen. Take the levels that you devils can't call me in. Big time kings. As I come to the side, big things. Now what you talking about? Close your mind. As I sell those goods, scream and shine. My sympathies and knuckles, tank and doors. I come to the clothes, I don't have holes. Don't pick up the clothes, Lord knows. Ain't no time to play, puppets the fucking and the sucking on the head. Wanna be a baller, shot caller, 20-inch blades, only Impala. Caller, get lit tonight. Switch a rope tight, got spray my eyes. I hit the highway, making money the flyway. But it's got to be a better way, a better way, better way, yeah.
Does anybody recognize it?
Snoop Dogg.
Over the last 16 years, I've had the opportunity to travel all over the country. I've worked gangs with gang units in Seattle, Portland, LA, Long Beach, Salt Lake City, lots of places, Vegas, and I don't know anything. I mean, I don't know anything. I don't know everything. So I'm always encouraging people to engage in conversation or of anything I can learn too, but I will share with you what I know. Looking at the historical perspective of gangs in America, you'll see that during the decade of the 70s, there were 201 U.S. cities that reported the presence of street gangs. During the decade of the 80s, there were 267 additional cities for a cumulative number of 468 U.S. cities that reported the presence of street gangs. However, during just the first 5 years of the 90s, over 1,000 new U.S. cities reported the presence of street gangs. 1,000 cities like Missoula, Montana, Great Falls, Idaho Falls, Pocatello, Coeur d'Alene, and so on, that didn't have gangs prior to 1990. Why do you think that was? What happened?
Internet?
What?
Internet,
The internet? And meaning how?
communication,
Okay, the internet does play a little bit, yeah,
What about just expansion? They're looking for new business.
obviously. Yep, good point, expansion. Were gangs in our country prior to 1970? Yeah. Gangs have been in the United States for about 220 years. The first gangs have been in the Five Points area of New York in the late 1700s. So we have had gangs for over 220 years in our country, and the gangs of today can be traced back social norm-wise to just after World War II for the last 60 years. Any question?
Oh, no, I was just going to see because I guess the lifestyle has been kind of glamorized in the 90s.
Glorification of the gang lifestyle, that's a very good point. Anything else?
Rap
There's-
music?
Rap music brings a good point. If you think about it, rap music or hip-hop is the voice of the inner city, the urban beat, which came out in mid to late 80s. Sugar Hill Gang, New York, first started mid-80s, and at that time, if you didn't live in an urban area and you didn't have a radio station or you could pick up, you didn't get that. And they weren't selling hip-hop music at Budget Tapes and Records in Missoula, Montana in 1988, okay? MTV comes along in 1986, and MTV, scratch that, MTV comes along in 1982, Sugar Hill Gang 1981. MTV is a real vehicle for getting the voice of the streets to mainstream America. And now, with Sam Goody and Hastings and Blockbuster and franchising, you now have what comes out in LA on a Tuesday when they're released is available in Missoula, Montana and anywhere else on Wednesday. So things have really quickened. Did hip-hop cause this? That's something to be debated, but there's something you're missing here. What do you think happened that caused 1,019 U.S. cities that were gang-free prior to 1990 to have gangs in 1995? That's a good point. Reporting could have been more accurate.
The drugs.
Drugs. What kind of drugs specifically?
Cocaine.
Huh? Not methamphetamine. Methamphetamine is a problem today, but historically,
Cocaine.
cocaine, and specifically what kind of cocaine? Crack. For those of you that don't know the difference, cocaine as it comes into our country is powdered cocaine, which is actually cocaine hydrochloride. And the hydrochloric aspect allows it to be water soluble, and so you can snort it. There's 4 ways to introduce a narcotic into your system. Inhalation, which is pretty effective. Injection, which is very effective. There's ingestion, which is not very effective when you have a headache and you pop Motrin. Your headache doesn't go away right away because your amino acids have to break it down, it has to get to your bloodstream. And then you have injection, which is very effective. You can introduce an injectable drug anywhere in your body, in your arm, in your neck, between your toes, behind your knees, and within about a minute on a healthy human, you're going to have a circulatory rate that's going to get into your brain. So those 4 ways are how we introduce narcotics into our system. Cocaine, as it comes from the south, comes as cocaine hydrochloride or powdered cocaine, which is inhaled, and a little conversion process.
Injection was twice, the 4th is smoking it.
I'm sorry, injection, inhalation, ingestion, and subcutaneous. I probably didn't say subcutaneous. Or absorption, that would be the 4th one. Thanks, Marty. That was good. Subcutaneous. So anyway, to make crack cocaine is no secret. It first showed up in Los Angeles in the summer of 1980. And basically you take a 50-50 cut of powdered cocaine with a equal additive, obviously 50-50 cut, and it is going to create, with a little conversion process, crack cocaine. Now, not every white powdery substance has a molecular structure to glom to the cocaine molecule. So baking sodium, or sodium bicarbonate is very common, but you can also use baby laxative and you can use laundry detergent to make crack cocaine. So we're going to take a jar and we're going to put in a boiling vat of water, and we're going to put 50% cocaine and we're going to put 50% sodium bicarbonate. We're going to add a little bit of ammonia, and we're going to bubble this, or we're going to cook it until it liquefies, cooks the water off, converts it, obviously gets them together, cooks the water off, and then you're going to have what's referred to as raw cocaine. That little conversion process did a couple things. Well, initially, it removed the hydrochloric aspect of the cocaine, which did two things. Number one, it's no longer water soluble. You can't snort rock cocaine, it's going to fall out of your face, little rocks. And number two, it lowered the ignition point. You'd have to have a very hot flame to vaporize powdered cocaine, but now with crack cocaine, you can smoke it with a butane lighter, okay? And now you have a drug that is highly addictive, very quick high, and very affordable. Gangs saw that as a vehicle, and that is why gangs who had been content for decades to stay in our urban areas made a very concerted effort to leave the comforts of what they had known for decades and come to middle America and suburbia. That is why gangs came to places like Missoula, and that's why gangs still exist today. We're going to talk about gangs and drugs and violence and how they go hand in hand. You're not going to have one in any size presence without having the others. They coexist. Another thing somebody brought up, reporting. That's a very good point, because if you think about it, in the late 80s, early 90s, lots of departments started gang units and gang task forces. And they started to do this as a community response, or as a response to the outcry by the community due to the youth violence that was attributed to youth gangs. And if you think about this crack cocaine epidemic, there is terms in our vocabulary now that are solely attributed to crack cocaine epidemic in America. Carjacking, home invasion robbery, those things we didn't say before, and they're attributed to crack cocaine. And if you remember back, the mid to late 80s saw a spike of youth violence that was unprecedented in our country. We're now about 2 generations into a very violent society that obviously gangs contribute to, but we saw a spike in youth violence between 1985 and 1989 that was almost 600% in youth-related homicides. 576 or 578% increase in that 5-year period in youth-related homicides in our country. Why did that occur? Because of the lucrative business that cocaine, crack cocaine, afforded. Now, historically, homicide has a very high solvent rate. In fact, in Missoula, I can only think of, and Marty or Rusty can correct me, I think there are only 3 or 4 unsolved homicides in the last 50 years. 3? Does that sound right? Anyway, it has a very high solvent rate. So traditionally, homicide has a high solvent rate, but at the same time that this youth violence epidemic takes hold from the mid to late 80s, homicide solvent rates in major metropolitan areas start to drop significantly. What do you think caused that? Why do you think homicides have a high solvent rate in the first place? That crime over robbery or rape or theft or burglary.
I'm familiar with the victim.
Very good. Whenever you in a crime can prove a connection between victim and suspect and a motive, you have a higher solvability. There's always a reason why people kill each other, and in 3/4 of murders, even today, 3/4, the high 70%, the victim knows the suspect. Okay? Those crimes, those murders that are hard to solve, are the ones where you can't prove a connection between victim and suspect, and or the motive isn't clear. So, youth homicide rates skyrocket, law enforcement solvent rates start to drop. And why was that? You're on what?
Because there are a lot of random shootings.
A lot of random shootings. So these kids are killing each other. They're killing each other over drugs and turf and other gang-related activity, but they don't know each other. And when you can't prove that connection between victim and suspect, you have a real hard time getting a successful solvent of a murder. Okay? So there's a correlation there. Homicide rates with youth go up, solvent rates go down. Los Angeles, last summer, I was there last in 77th Division. 77th Division, obviously there's 21 divisions, 24 divisions actually in LAPD now, and 77th Division is about 21 square miles. What is Missoula? About 25 square miles. So 77th Division, a little smaller than Missoula, and it has about 165,000 people in it, so about 3 times the population, not quite, 2.5 times. Their homicide solvent rate for 2007, they had about 60 of them when I was there last summer, their solvent rate was 19%. That's atrocious if you think about it. Because you think the person who kills their wife of the boyfriend that kills his girlfriend, or the neighbor that kills the neighbor, or the guy that kills a kid for breaking into his car, are they likely or as likely to kill again than a gang member is? Less likely, right? So think about this. In these neighborhoods where people like us reside, and they can't leave, it's their home, that's where they're proud to be from, and they live and they raise families like we do, and their kids go to school. 4 out of every 5 people that kill somebody get away with it, and they're on the streets with them, with their kids. That's pretty atrocious if you think about it. Okay? Crack cocaine, as I talked about, a highly addictive stimulant. Why did it take so hold? Was because the addictive quality of it. You're going to see that if we compare crack cocaine to powdered cocaine, you're going to see that rocks sell for $5 to $20. Okay, if we were standing at Wilshire, Normandy right now, February 5th, 2008, we'd be slinging rocks all day long for $3 to $5. 1,000 rocks would make us $3 to $5 grand. If we were at Rainier Valley of Seattle, we'd be selling it for 8 to 10. Hilltop area, Tacoma, 8 to 10. Spokane, 10. Missoula, 20. Now why is that? Because with drugs, supply and demand, just like the stock market. Okay? If demand exceeds supply, prices are high. When supply exceeds demand, prices stabilize. So, does that mean Missoula is a place to buy crack? No, Missoula is not alone in that. But the thing is, what's important here, if I'm an 8-tray gangster out of Long Beach and I got 1,000 rocks, how much money am I going to make in Long Beach?
$5 grand.
$5 grand. And the police are pretty good at what they do. And I'm getting shot at, and I got lots of competition, and I'm getting jacked up. Or I can take a 12 to 14-hour trip to somewhere in Montana or somewhere in rural America, and how much money am I going to make? 20 grand. That's a 400% profit. There's probably no one in this room if I told you, you give me $5 grand, you drive to LA, and when you get there I'll give you 20 grand. I would bet pretty much everybody here would do that. Would you take a day off from work to do that? Okay, so you can see the motivation to travel with a huge money to be made, especially crack cocaine, because now you have a highly addictive, affordable stimulant. Because if you think about it, powdered cocaine, depends where you're at in the country, $100 to $120 a gram back in the day. How many of you or how many of your kids have $100 in your pockets you can part with, and it's no big deal? Some of you do, some of you don't. Okay, so because cocaine was at that price, it was really relegated to the middle to upper class. It was a social drug. How many kids have $5, $10, or $20 in their pocket at any given time they can do away with? Okay, everybody has that. And also, when you start to have a crack cocaine market, you're not just going to see sales. You're going to see related peripheral crimes, like carjacking, like thefts, like burglary, like prostitution. People don't think about that, but I mean, for a kid or a street person to go turn a $20 trick to get one more rock for one more half an hour of high is what it takes. Because they say when you're addicted to crack, every waking minute, your body craves that drug. And we're easily awake anywhere between 14, 15, 16 hours a day, and we're going to see this effect that cocaine or crack cocaine has on our body. Homeostasis, our body's ability to operate at a norm. No influences of depressants or stimulants. You're going to see with powdered cocaine, depending on the cut, it's going to get you high for anywhere between 2 and 4 hours. Okay? The high is going to take effect within about 5 minutes of inhalation, and you're going to get a good high for about 2, 3, 4 hours. Now, with any powdered drug, an average dosage amount is an 1/8 gram. Some people use a quarter, but usually people use about 1/8 gram dosage amounts. So if I was to be a drug dealer and I sold somebody a gram of cocaine, and it's a social drug, not a fiend drug like meth and crack, they're going to get high when they go out partying, they're going to get high maybe when they're doing things outside of work and when they're not working, maybe on the weekends. You're going to get high how many times off a gram? About 8 times. And if you snorted 2 or 3 lines a night on a Friday, a couple lines on Saturday, went out again Wednesday, did another one, I'm probably not going to see you for a week, right? So I make $100, $150 a gram on a week amount. That's pretty good. Crack cocaine, on the other hand, is going to get you twice as high as powdered cocaine, which is incredible high, and it's only going to last for about 30 minutes. And it's going to get you high within seconds of you smoking it. Now, when you get high and you come back down, do you stop right here in homeostasis? No, you come down a little bit. And if you never did it again, your body would be probably good to go and you'd be okay. But if you get right here and you get high again, now this time do you come right back down to here? No, you come a little lower. And you can see the continued deviation of homeostasis results physiologically in what? Addiction. Picture perfect. Continued deviation of homeostasis results in addiction. Now, how does this happen? There's a few kids in Missoula that smoke marijuana. In fact, traveling to the schools and them telling me themselves over the years, and obviously maybe they don't be completely honest, but it's pretty common year in and year out, doesn't matter what public high school you're at, the kids will say that they think between 1 in 4 and 1 out of 5 kids in Missoula smoke marijuana once a week. Does that surprise anybody? Now these kids are smart. They never use crack cocaine, and they only stick to marijuana, as JC said, entry-level drug. You know, we have this initiative, no problem, we can handle our marijuana. So how does this happen? Well, you can be in Missoula, you can be in Polson, you can be anywhere in America. It's Friday night, mom and dad went to the lake, they went to the cabin, left you with a 20, and the house to yourself. Or mom and dad are home and you're out for the night, and you go to a party, and at this party, kids are getting high. And that's pretty common, that's what kids do. And they're smoking weed. And somebody shows up at this party, and he has a little piece of rock and a little glass pipe, and he says, you know, that weed's pretty sweet. Why don't you try some of this? Do you think every kid at that party is going to take a drug from a stranger? No. However, given the opportunity to try a drug for free, do you think some kids will? So here's a kid, and I pop this glass pipe in your face, throw a little rock in, and I light it, and in 10 seconds, you have a high that's twice as high as cocaine, and you've only smoked marijuana. And 30 minutes later, I find you again, and I said, man, what do you think of that? Like, man, that's incredible. I said, come on, Holmes. We go into the garage, we go out on the deck, we go in the basement, we go outside, we go in the bathroom, and I put that glass pipe in your face again, and I light it up. And I do that 3 or 4 times that night. Did you pay me anything? Not a penny. Now, how many people give free blunts away at parties? That doesn't happen, does it? So why would I go and waste 4 or 5 rocks on this kid in nowhere America? Why?
You know you're going to hook them.
Because the addictive quality of crack cocaine is you can be addicted in as little as 3 uses. So if I create a crackhead who now fiends that drug, and every waking minute that you're awake, 16 hours a day, you're craving that little rock that's going to get you high for 30 minutes. Is that smart for me? Let's look. Powdered cocaine, $150 a gram, or rock cocaine, $10 a rock. I'm going to take the middle of the road. Duration of high, 4 to 5 hours or 30 minutes. 1 gram per customer, or per week per 10 customers to keep it simple, or 10 rocks per day. That's only going to get you high for 5 hours, so a crackhead can easily consume more than 10 rocks a day. 10 times 150 or 10 times 10 times 10, $1,500 a week, or $1,000 a day. Now, obviously that's not all profit, because with any business you have overhead and you have cost. But the big thing here is you have a nearly 400% profit margin in crack cocaine distribution, and you have a highly addictive stimulant that's affordable by everybody. Gangs saw that. They saw that in the early 80s to the mid 80s, and they made a concerted effort to spread like wildfire across our country, and they did. Let's look at today. How does that, let's fast forward 25 years or 20 years. NDIC, National Drug Intelligence Center, does a national threat survey, national drug threat survey on our country each year. And basically, in 2003, they wanted to see what influence street gangs and outlaw motorcycle gangs have on drug distribution in America. Do you think it was significant or not? Show your hands. Okay, a little tired. We've been here. We've been all been up since 6 or 7 this morning. Let's look at meth, marijuana, cocaine, and crack. The first, I'm going to show you a specific where Montana is at, Southwest, Southeast, Great Lakes, West Central, and Mid-Atlantic. Now, California is with us, so obviously that's going to have some influence here. But the Pacific Coast region, what percentage of drug distribution is influenced by street gangs and outlaw motorcycle gangs? 74% of meth distribution today in our area of the country has a gang influence. 2/3 of marijuana and over half of cocaine. How about the Southwest? Southeast, Great Lakes, West Central, and Mid-Atlantic. Does it surprise anyone that we in the Northwest, or the Pacific Northwest, lead the country in drug distribution influenced by gangsters with marijuana and methamphetamine. Obviously, methamphetamine is the problem drug of today, and gangs see that now. Back in the day, in the late 80s, they were saying that about 80% of crack distribution had a gang influence. Today, you can see it's gone down a little bit. It's in the 50s, but it's because meth is so affordable. Okay? Street gang activity in our country. Let's look at a couple things here. Between 70 and 95, these statistics apply because that was the years of the study. But you could really take these numbers and go from 85 to 95, and that's where you're going to have this change. You're going to see that the average size of a gang city fell from a city the size of Spokane, Tacoma, or Vancouver, to the cities the size of Great Falls, Missoula, and Idaho Falls. Obviously, same with the gang counties, but you're going to see that the number of small gangs or small gang cities increased much more rapidly than larger cities. Why is that? Because gangs have existed in bigger cities for decades. They were never our problem until the early 90s. So like I said, if you took that study and really went from 85 to 95 is when that change occurred. National Youth Gang Survey came out in 1995 as a result of public awareness by the gang violence that was reaching epidemic proportions in our country in the late 80s, early 90s. And it was out of this public outcry that the government wanted to see what influence gangs really have in our country. Because gangsters were killing each other in the hoods for a long time. But when they're killing each other in Cabrini Greens and Nickerson Gardens and Jordan Downs, that's not touching us. It doesn't make the nightly news. But when their stray bullets hit grandma in her house, or the baby in the house next door, or the kid wearing a McDonald's uniform that gets lit up walking home because he's wearing red in a Crip neighborhood, that's what makes the news. And so pretty soon, you start to have non-gang victims, and it starts to become national news. And as gangs spread from the urban areas to the suburban and middle America areas that they had never been before, with them, the violence comes. And with that violence, innocent non-gang victims come, and with that comes a public outcry for the government, or more specifically, the police, to do something about this. So, Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention want to do a study, what influence gangs have in our country, and they sent these studies, or these surveys, out to law enforcement. 1995 or 1996, the first study was mailed to 2,629 law enforcement agencies, and you'll see that 1,393 reported the presence of street gangs. In the first 5 years of this study, or the last 5 years of the 1990s, you see that this starts to decline. Now, if we had more time, we could talk about that. Do you think almost 375 U.S. cities solved their gang problem in 5 years? No. So why would there be a decline?
Attrition.
Maybe attrition, but the numbers have actually gone up.
Move to cities that aren't being surveyed?
Maybe that's what you kind of maybe track. Does law enforcement have to complete lots of paperwork to get federal money and grants for our budgets? And this is one more piece of paper, and did it give us 1 penny? It didn't. So my belief is, because obviously gang numbers have not gone down, you have less and less cities that are responding to the survey. Does that make sense? Let's look at gang affiliates by age. Now, this is nationwide, and these are 2004 numbers. You're going to see that under 15, this is pretty consistent with Missoula, you're going to see 14 to 24, 25-year-olds. Almost 1 out of 3 are upper teens, almost half young adults, and 14% over 24. Anybody here been to East LA? It's a cool place, a little far out of the way of Knott's Berry Farm and Disneyland, where you probably go, but East LA is very interesting in the fact that it's 18 miles from the Pacific Ocean, and you commonly run into people, males from East LA, who've never been to the ocean. Now we live 496 miles from the Oregon coast, which they call it a coast and not the beach because it's so cold, yet we drive that far and we run in and freeze, and we're all happy traveling that far from Montana, right? These guys live 18 miles from the Pacific Ocean, Redondo Beach, Venice Beach, good surfing areas, and they never go there. Why is that?
Territory.
Territory. If I go across that freeway, if I cross that viaduct, if I go over those railroad tracks, or if I cross those power lines, life's a little hazardous to my health. So I don't leave my neighborhood. Okay? East LA, strong in tradition. Tortilla Flats, some of the oldest gangs, Garrity, some of the oldest gangs that you're going to see in LA came out of East LA. And it's not uncommon that you see gangsters and their dad and their granddad who are gangsters. Now you think about how you break law enforcement or school resource officers or someone who's trying to do interdiction, and you try to break that pattern when you have that much family influence. I don't care how bad your dad is to you, he can sexually abuse you, he can beat you, and when you're little, who do you look up to if you're a little boy? And if your dad's gone, do you immediately look up to your mom? Sometimes, but not usually. Who are you going to look up to? Your brothers, your uncles, or older males, cousins or granddads in your family. And you can just imagine when you take this kid in this environment and try to say, hey, you're going down the wrong road, we see you're involved in gangs, and we're here to tell you you're making a big mistake, and we want to help you. Did you just disrespect him? And his family, very much. It'd be like telling someone up here, pulling them in at Big Sky or Seminole or Hellgate, telling them you heard they were this or that religion, and you're here to tell them that that's a big mistake. Okay, it's part of that kid, and it's who he is. And unless you're there, you really can't believe it. But what's good here, we don't have hoods. We have neighborhoods. What's the difference between a hood and a neighborhood? Obviously the word neighbor. We have a vested interest. You know, if a house tonight burned down in Stockton, California, or in Fort Benton, Montana, which community do you think would come together to help that family tomorrow more? Yeah. So more and more people get together. If they lose that sense of community, pretty soon I'm coming home from work, I'm locking myself in my house, I got bars on my windows, bars on my doors. When my neighbors are being victimized, I don't get involved because I don't want my name on that court paper, because they're going to get me. If they can't get me, they get my kid in the school. If they can't get my kid in the school, they know my brother or my cousin is in Folsom or Soledad State Prison, and they will get them there because they gain control of prisons. And you can see how in these metro urban areas, the justice system is starting to crumble. The police can go in with helicopters and dogs and lots of cops and control environments, and we can take over and do what we need to do, take care of business. And when we leave the government, we live in the greatest country on earth, and we have urban areas where the government or the police have no control. The streets are controlled by the thugs and the gangsters. And people like us have to live there. We have to raise our families. We have to help our kids with homework. We have to get our kids to basketball. Our kids got to go to school here. They do paper routes, and they live just like us, but they live there. So we don't have to deal with that, and we're going to come back locally in just a second. Let's look at social classification. A lot of people think that gangsters are poor. A lot are, 50%, but almost as many, 47%, are like us. Now, this study was done in 2004. If that was done 20 years earlier in 1984, do you think any of those numbers would be drastically different? Where were the gangsters primarily in 1984? They were in the projects and the hoods. And then they spread across our country, and they come to places like Missoula and other similar cities. And what is the majority of our population? Working to middle class, right? So now that national norm is influenced by the fact that gangs have spread out of the cities. By race, almost half are Hispanic, which shouldn't surprise anybody, because what ethnic group has immigrated to America so much in 2099, more than anyone else in those census? Hispanics. 1/3 are African American, 13% are Caucasian, 7% Asian, and 2% are other. What is other?
Russian,
Eastern European.
Eastern European and Russian are Caucasian.
Native American.
Native American, very good. Historically, Native Americans have never involved themselves in gang activity, yet this generation of Native American youth have fully immersed themselves. It doesn't matter if you're in Poplar, Montana, in the middle of nowhere, or if you're in reservations in the southwest area of New Mexico or Arizona, and you're influenced by Phoenix and Santa Fe. So every race of youth have involved themselves in gangs across our country. 2004 National Youth Gang Survey. When we get through this, 2,296 law enforcement agencies were surveyed. How many different gang sets do you think were identified in our country in 2004? Not just the Crips and the Bloods, but Nuestra Familia, Nuestra Raza, La M.A., Latin Kings, Vice Lords, Black Gangster Disciples, so on, so on, so on, so on, so on. How many different gang sets do you think were identified in the United States of America? A couple hundred? What do you say?
Half of that?
Half of that? 1,100?
440.
Okay. Now that should surprise people, because as I said when I started this, we only know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. 24,000 different gang sets were identified by law enforcement in the United States of America in 2004. And I would submit to you, that number is low. Anyone disagree or agree? Do you think every law enforcement agency has an accurate understanding of what's going on in their jurisdiction? No? Do you think every law enforcement agency that thinks they have a gang presence or problem, that sheriff or chief of police is willing to admit it? Is that a positive thing? Nope. And do you think there's any non-law enforcement government entities that put pressure on law enforcement to underreport? We're trying to attract corporations and businesses to our city and say, hey, we're better than the next one down the road. Come here. And that little trifold brochure you get, on the back page it doesn't say, oh yeah, and we have a hell of a drug problem, youth gangs, and youth violence. So for those three reasons, I would tell you that there are more gangs in our country than that. But that should astonish most of you to find out that gangs have become such a societal norm in America that we are never going to solve the problem. They're in law enforcement, they're in the military, they're committing a lot more crimes that are more mob-like, and we don't have time to talk about it, but what is a gang? An organized group of youth or persons that consort together to form an alliance or identifying group names, color signs, or symbols who are actively involved in antisocial criminal behavior for the purpose of financial gain or power. That fits the Hells Angels, that fits whatever set of Crips or Bloods you want. And you can see the first part, the first three elements are just a group. So what sets a gang apart from a group? The fact that they're engaged in antisocial criminal behavior for a purpose. So by definition, gangsters are criminals. That's how we can focus our efforts towards them. Because being in a gang is not against the law in America. Engaged in criminal activity, that is. Indicators of a street gang presence. We're going to skip through this because I'm running out. Why do you think kids join gangs? And do they join gangs for the same reason in a city of 65,000 as they would in a city of 650,000 or 6,500?
Identity.
Identity. Okay. What else?
Learned behavior.
Learned behavior. That's a good one.
Protection.
What?
Protection.
Protection. Protection can be real or perceived, right? Because again, what you perceive out of your eyes is reality to you. What else?
Peer pressure.
Peer pressure. Good one. Your friends and your family.
Lack of family structure.
Very good. Lack of acceptance within your family. What else?
Easy way to make money is how they
Easy way. Opportunity for money. Lack of acceptance within their families. Very common. You missed this one. Think this one has any influence?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and that vacuum of not having a positive adult role model, they find that in gangs. And although we would say that's not positive, they're getting feedback into them, if they're lacking it, it fills a vacuum. Influenced by family or friends, as you said, protection, status, which you said to begin with, money and opportunity, and then this one, glorification of the gang lifestyle. Okay, that has had an influence. Because if you think about it today, if you went around to any high school class in a big city, in a small town, in Missoula, wherever, and you gave them all a piece of paper and said, okay kids, I want you to write down who your role model is and why. I think the majority of those kids are going to say, my mom and my dad.
Yes.
Or are they going to say entertainers and athletes and hip-hop artists and actors, especially athletes? Anyone disagree with me? So now you think about it, we're out here raising our kids and we're trying to do the best we can, yet when they get to high school age, not many of us are their role model. What does that tell you about our society? And is it bred to a very violent society? What causes gangs to migrate? What caused them to come here and other places? We talked about crack, but what else do you think caused them to come here?
Less competition.
Less competition and opportunity, because why? We don't know about them, right?
Yeah.
Do you think there's been any community in America that stuck their head in the sand and said that that can't happen here? Think a few have done that, or you think a lot have done that? Okay, what else do you think, what causes gangs to migrate? $17,000 plus people moved to Missoula County between 1990 and 2000. You think any of them came from an urban area? Think any of them brought a child with them that they tried to get out of a gang environment? Do you think all those kids appreciated that second chance and they flourished here and gave up the gang lifestyle? Do you think any of those kids were now a big fish in a little pond? And I can tell you this, I don't care if you're in a school of 2,000 or a school of 26. You take a kid who walks and talks like a gangster and you put him in that student body, you are going to have a percent of kids who are interested in him. I don't care if it's a Class C school in Drummond or it's CMR in Great Falls. There's going to be kids who are interested in that kid. So this hip-hop culture is not a big city thing anymore. It's very much a social norm with kids. Kids all over America. Organized criminal activity. They move because they don't have competition. Relocated through the Interstate Compact. That's through the Department of Corrections, and they relocate people to help rehabilitate them. We had one that came to Missoula from Yakima a few years ago, and he came to Missoula for a shooting. He had served less than 4 years for shooting a kid in Yakima. Came to Missoula in September or October. Shot a kid here in January. Was in jail about 3 weeks when we got his DOC commitment papers that he was here. A little too much leg time. So, you know, some states dump on rural states when it comes to interstate compact. Active duty military assignments. Can't stress enough. I mean, you know, you're in the Air Force in San Antonio, your kids get involved in local gangs, so you move to Minot or Rapid City or Great Falls to get them out of that, or Cheyenne, and next thing you do, now you just brought a kid here, and now they're influencing those kids too. Any of you ever eat at Burger King on North Reserve? No? Do you think you ever had your Whopper made by a kid who killed a person in Sacramento and served about 6.5 years and was paroled up here at 20 years of age? He was a gangster. Now think about this. Here's this kid, and he's here now. And think about this kid who grew up in this gang environment where violence is so prevalent. And even though he and your kid are 15 or 16-year-old American males, they're very much different. There are some of you in this room that couldn't kill a person if you had to. You would die if someone was going to kill you because you couldn't pull the trigger. Fact. There's some of you that would kill a person in protection of yourself in extreme situations because that's way up here and you would hope you never have to do it, but you would if you had to. Now you could ask kids, how many people have you known in Missoula, ask kids, how many people have you known who've been murdered? Very few would know anybody. How many have you known who have died violently? Very few would know anybody. How many people have you known who have died? Now they'd have some kids or friends killed in car wrecks and some adults who died of old age. Now you think about this in a big city, East LA, when all the time you're growing up, you're exposed to violence. You hear gunshots at night. You sleep in your bathtub because you're worried of stray bullets. You walk to school and you see people cleaning blood off the sidewalk. And you hear and you know people who die and kill each other. And pretty soon, when someone disrespects you or someone looks at you wrong, because respect is such a big thing, when you're exposed to this violence day after day after day and it becomes a norm to you, this bar that you wouldn't cross unless you absolutely had to starts to come down, and pretty soon it's down to an acceptable level. I remember being a murder there one day, and here's a body laying there by an In-N-Out Burger, in a crowd of 300 people. It's hot, and there's a murder there, and the whole neighborhood's out. And you have moms holding their babies and fanning them babies and fanning themselves. You got kids riding around on big wheels and tricycles. Now, how many of you, if you had a dead body outside your house tomorrow, would you let your toddler chill out there and hang out riding his bike playing football? You wouldn't. But it's norm. The kids are exposed to that. So when they come up here, and now here's this kid who's working paroled, working a fast food restaurant, and he's sitting out back smoking, or he's at the mall, or he's here and somebody bumps into him, somebody looks at him wrong, somebody questions him, and he comes from a different culture, he comes from a different way that you stand up for yourself. Can you see how that could lead to innocent victims? So Obviously, that's happened. Post-secondary education, think there's any grizzly athletes been gangsters? And it hasn't just been this year. So I mean, some kids, they benefit themselves, they get that college education, and they're off and running, and that's great. But oftentimes they don't. Okay? When, it wasn't too many years ago that Washington State had 3 West Side rolling 60 Crips out of Long Beach playing football for them. Now all of a sudden, this set out of Long Beach, who's never heard of Pullman, Washington, do they have a reason to go to Pullman, Washington? They can make money selling dope. The girls like them. Right? People don't know the threat that they are. I can ride around with this girl. I can hang in her apartment. I can sling dope. Everybody likes me. The police don't know anything about me. The police are even nice to me. Think that would be kind of addictive if you can get out of the inner city and experience that? Okay. So, like I said, some people get that college education and they remove themselves from the hood and they never look back. But many others don't, because that's who they are. It's like a U.S. Marine. Some gangsters, they're as proud of themselves as a U.S. Marine. You get a guy who's in the Marines 20 years ago, and he's still proud to be a Marine, because that's part of him. That's how they live too. The impact on the community, this is just amazing. Baldwin Park, little area of LA, where they did a RICO act on the Black Pea Stones, one gang. Think about living here. Baldwin Village is about 1 square mile. 1 square mile, pretty small area. 700 to 800 gang members living in 1 square mile, and they're not all the same set. And the Black Pea Stones are responsible for over 1,500 aggravated assaults in a 5-year period, not to mention over 24 homicides. Think that would impact how you live your life? That's why we live in Montana, right? There's been no community in America, large or small, none, who have been able to eradicate gangs once they become entrenched. So again, I can't stress enough that here in Missoula, that we have gone 16 years now with a gang presence that has not developed into a gang problem. Okay? 1991, we had 3 shootings in a 6-week period in the summer of 1991. First drive-by shooting in Missoula involved a 15-year-old kid from Big Sky who shot 2 kids at a party up in the Rattlesnake in a drive-by. Neither of them died. We had a kid shot in Karis Park by some gangsters out of Washington. He didn't die, but that was kind of the first splash, the rock, that splashed into our community having a gang presence. And that continued. 94, you had Casey Keck in the inner block of West Pine shot Jose Jesus Bravo in the face over a simple disrespect issue. And Casey Keck from Nevada and Jose is from California, a Crip and a Norteño. So it starts to roll at that point. The mid-90s come and we start to have lots of local kids that are very interested in this, and different gangs are starting to come about. You have Chad Williams and David Thompson who were dared when they're high on methamphetamine in 1996 to go find someone to shoot. And they drive around Missoula just looking for someone to shoot. And they find Lewis Craighead over near Paxton and 34th, a kid they don't know, in Missoula, Montana, where it doesn't happen. He's walking down the street, they get up, they say, "Man, you got some money on you?" He said, "I ain't got no money." He's like, "Let me see you open your pockets." And as he's taking his pockets out, the first one shoots him in the stomach, right there on the street. He falls down. "What are you doing?" "I don't have no money." They're laughing about it. The kid walks up behind him, puts a gun at the base of his head, shoots him. They now change the gun, and he's down on the ground, they put the gun in his ear, and they shoot him again. And as they go through his pockets, as he lays there on the street, in a total random act of violence, they get back in their car, and they shoot him one last time in the face, and he puts his hand up and it goes through. Now that kid lived. He shot 3 times, well, twice in the head, which I can't believe he lived through that. But that was something that really rocked the community, not to mention when David Wurst, who was a 14-year-old 8th grader at C.S. Porter in 1996, killed a 57-year-old guy over a carton of cigarettes at the TNC Lounge over a theft. Now, I don't care if there's 700 gang-related or 700 homicides and 57% of them are gang-related in Los Angeles County, and I don't care how many gang-related homicides are on Spokane, and I don't care what goes on in Great Falls. I care about Missoula, as you do. This is my community. This is where my kids go to school. This is where I'm from. And one 14-year-old killing a guy over a carton of cigarettes was a little ridiculous. So it doesn't take many acts of violence to get a community together. We don't have to go too much farther to 98, which made me hate the term wannabe. It's funny too. We always call these kids who are local kids wannabes. And if you think about it, why are they wannabes? Because they're not from the city. Yet, we have people robbing stores here, robbing casinos, robbing motels, and we don't call them wannabe robbers because they don't do it in the city. We have people rape people here, and we don't call them wannabe rapists. Yet if we have kids, and they're local kids, and they're gangsters, or they fashion themselves to be, we call them wannabe. And I hate that term. I hate that term since Bob Heinley was shot by a wannabe. Because calling someone a wannabe puts an officer at a tactical disadvantage personally, but also puts the community at a disadvantage to realize what threat this kid poses to our community. And I don't care if you got a 8-tray gangster crip out of Long Beach, or you got a local kid from Missoula, Montana, and they got a 9mm. If they're willing to pull the trigger, they're a threat to us. Okay? Now, who poses a bigger threat to us? Resident or non-resident gang affiliates, do you think? In Missoula. Non-resident. Non-resident gang affiliates pose a bigger threat. Why? What are they doing when they come here primarily? They're slinging dope. There's gangsters in your city right now tonight. There's gangsters that came here this weekend, and there's gangsters that come here this next weekend. But you have your pattern. You get up, you go to work, you shop at the same store, you go out to eat now and then, you go to a movie, you watch your news at night to make sure you know what's going on in your community, and if your friends don't tell you about it, and you don't see it, and Jill doesn't tell you about it, then it's not happening, right? So we only know what we know, and I can't stress that enough. Today, Missoula. Okay, do we have a gang problem? No. Have we ever had a gang problem? No. And I can say that with absolute fact. But to me, a problem means something's out of control. It's a problematic stage, it's out of control. We're not out of control. We're not out of control because the Missoula Police Department took a very concerted effort to deal with gang activity, both resident and non-resident, with a zero tolerance. Doesn't matter if you're a middle school kid who's got this infant stages of this mentality, this interest, or if you're a non-resident gangster who thinks you're going to roll up here and you're going to be able to sell dope in Missoula. JC didn't touch on it, he didn't have a lot of time, but it is so easy to make money selling dope. You can go to Spokane, we could go to Spokane tomorrow morning with minimal connections and buy an ounce of meth or an ounce of cocaine for about $800. And we come back here in 3 hours and we're dilling it, and we're going to gram it up and sell it for $100 a gram. So it cost us $800. 3 or 4 hours later, we're going to make $3,500 or $3,600 in Missoula, Montana. That's cake. Spokane has a big-time gang problem. Spokane has identified over 700 LA-based gangsters since they started keeping track in the late 80s. This picture, I'm a big stat guy, but this picture is amazing when you consider this is crack cocaine arrest by the Spokane Police Department, and 5 minutes? Okay. Keep in mind, too, that the federal government estimates that law enforcement only successfully interdicts 7% of the drugs in our streets. No more than 10%, somewhere between 7 and 10% of all the drugs that law enforcement gets, on average, anywhere in the country each year. 90% gets to the customer. Keep in mind that Spokane didn't have the support of the community, which we very much have, and we've approached it as a community problem. This gang thing, this drug thing, and this youth violence thing is not my problem. It's not Marty's or Rusty's or Mark's or JC's. It's ours. It's not a police thing. It's a community thing. And places that have approached it as such have had much more success. This is amazing when Spokane can do this. And obviously this is old news. It's a long time ago. You go from less than 10 to almost 600 in 3 years, and today Spokane has a huge problem. What was our response? We needed to address the emerging gang problem and deal with it with a zero tolerance, and we were going to travel around and learn from other places. We weren't going to reinvent the wheel. And the Target Enforcement Unit in the 90s, up to was morphed into the Street Crimes Unit today, has been very integral in maintaining or making sure that didn't happen. Okay, I'm going to end with a video. This video, I've made about 30 videos. I'm pretty proud of this one. I'm going to end on this, and it's just going to keep you thinking about how we as Americans live and the violence that we accept. Now, go ahead.
One of the things I want people in Missoula to know is that we don't call somebody a gangster without a criteria. Guy, you have that back there.
There you go.
Before the
Very good point. Obviously, I'm just running out of time, but this is a criteria we have, and this criteria is recognized. I mean, most communities in Montana, Billings, Bozeman, Kalispell, got this from us because we were kind of the leader in the early to mid-'90s on getting this going. And we track our gangsters probably more than anyone except maybe Great Falls, as much as Great Falls, but better than anyone in the state. But you can see here, and this is in your handout. I gave you a handout to read later because I know I talk fast, and you can see this in there. But there's a criteria here, and you have to meet 3 of these. Now, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, or you're wearing a blue bandana and you're just an average kid, you're not going to be a gangster. But you can see this is what gangsters do. So if you're a gangster, you're not going to meet 2 or 3 of these. You're going to meet 6 or 7 of them. Okay, it's not uncommon, okay? This video I put together to end on, it's about violence in America. I think it's going to open your eyes a little bit. There's a part when you see an elevator that there is going to be a person that commits suicide, and it's not there for gore factor. It's there to enunciate a very big point on this video. I want to end with this, and then I'll be around when this is over to talk to you. I think this will open your eyes too.
Well, I just heard the news today. Seems my life is gonna change. I close my eyes, begin to pray. Then tears of joy stream down my face. My arms were open under the sunlight. Welcome to this place. I'll show you everything. With arms wide open. With arms wide open. When I
your time, and I got some cards here if I can help you with any other presentations or any other civic groups you have. I know we didn't have a lot of time, but I'll be here, I'll stay here as long as you want. Anyone have any questions, we can chat. So I appreciate your time, and I know it's been a long day. Thank you.
Guy takes an 8-hour presentation for our Citizens Academy, and he condenses it into what you saw here. What you saw in this last film is something that we see in Missoula quite a bit, way more than we should. So unfortunately, welcome to our world.
Can you say how many people you believe are in Missoula that are members of gangs, or how many gangs?
Well, if you see in there, I put that in there. There's probably about 100, and it fluctuates. We've been very successful in Missoula. The county attorney's office and actually the district court judges can't be thanked enough in the late 90s, basically taking a one strike and you're out mentality. So, this is something though that we can't hang our hat on and have won. It's a day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year thing. We could be inundated and out of control this summer. Hopefully we won't, because each year that goes by, we as an organization, as a department, and as being the front runner in the community have, just like this, we just exposed 35 more citizens to help us combat this situation, and we just are diligent about it. But I can't stress enough, I mean, there's very few cities that have had a gang presence for 15 years that has not developed into a gang problem. I mean, that's a big credit to our staff and the people on our department that work on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, holidays, when you're with your kids, and at night, it's kind of weird being a cop if you think about it. It's normal to put your kids to bed and go to bed. It's not normal to kiss your kids and your wife goodnight or your husband and leave for the night. So that's why we get paid the big bucks.
Thank you.
If you need to leave, go ahead and leave. If you'd like to sit and still ask Guy or JC's here some more questions, we'll leave them here and we'll go ahead and answer questions. But if you need to leave, because it is getting late, and that is always one of our problems in our Citizen Academy, is that the time flies way too fast. Doesn't Bruce?
One of the things too, I credit the department for its proactive stance on gangs, but you're looking at the main reason why we don't have gangs in Missoula, Montana.
Thank you.
Yeah, next week, 6:30 at the Latimer, we're going to have chili for the evening. And there's a question right here.
I just noticed in the photos in the first part that you showed, a lot of them were doing different things with their hands. Are those mean?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, with gangs, symbols and colors and numbers have major significance. I mean, the number 14, Northern California Hispanics, 13, Southern California Hispanics, the color blue, color red, 6-pointed stars, 5-pointed crowns. I mean, they all mean something, because obviously these guys are always trying to stay one step ahead of us. They want to represent on the street without law enforcement being able to identify them. Now, the last 5, 6, 7 years, they've realized if I don't make such a spectacle of myself, law enforcement can't target my activity, because obviously they're getting hammered with RICO acts and other conspiracy cases. And so now it's very common for gangsters to deny gang affiliation to the police. So I mean, you'll see the paraphernalia and stuff and the tattoos and the mannerisms, but they'll deny it. So yeah, it all means something. I mean,
Graffiti.
And graffiti too. Obviously, graffiti's the newspaper of the streets. Gangbanging in America is kind of like the English language now. After hybrid gangs started to exist in the early 90s, the history was kind of lost, because the hybrid aspect of it now, there's really no norm. I mean, it's like the English language. For every rule, there's an exception. And what is consistent in Missoula may or may not be consistent in Great Falls. What's consistent in Spokane may be consistent in Yakima or Compton, or it may not. It's just kind of to each his own. And so any kid can call himself whatever, and that's why we have that criteria. If you got a kid and he's throwing hand signs and he's doing some graffiti, or he's just at that initial stages that he thinks it's cool, we're going to be able to identify him, then use the community for intervention and prevention activity, as opposed to just throwing him in jail. Because that only works so much. You can only put people in cages, and you'll have some success initially, but you won't have sustained success by doing that. So obviously getting in. And one thing, it doesn't happen very often. It has happened a few times. It's pretty rewarding. But when you can be that positive adult role model for these kids, and police officers are sometimes in that role, it's pretty rewarding. Oftentimes, though, it's not. I mean, they're not cool to be friends with us. And even if you have a rapport with a kid, you might have a rapport with this kid when he's by himself, and when he's with his boys, He's not gonna be friendly to you, and you gotta know that too. I mean, you're at the scene of a shooting, and here's a kid who you gave a break for being in Faruqi's on probation, and you didn't call his probation officer, which is a felony, but you let him roll a month ago, and here he is, and somebody over here said, well, those three were here, and if I walk over and I say, yeah, what's up? And he said, not much, guy, how you doing? And I say, hey, what happened here? I don't know, guy. Well, man, I got people over here saying you saw this. I didn't see nothing. Bet you guys see something? Didn't see nothing. That's what I'm going to say. So the difference of that, why even open your mouth and do that to get lied to? That's going to happen. So the difference of me saying, hey, man, what's up? Good to see you. Who's your friends here? What's your name? I'm Guy. I'll probably get a first name is all and a first name. Now I'm going to say, I'm very busy here. I'm sure you guys didn't see nothing, did you? Nope, didn't see nothing, Guy. Well, hey, that girlie we talked about last time, she was asking about you. Call me in a little bit. I got to go. And I leave. Now, I didn't front him in front of his boys, and when he calls me later and I say, hey, I let you roll a few months ago, I didn't call your PO, and I need to know something now. And he's just say, man, I don't want to put my name down on paper. I'll try to keep it off the paper. I can't promise you that. Depends how much I can twist him, okay, and how much I need the information. But I'd rather have information that someone tells me that I can't put on paper and I still know it than not to know it. So obviously, you know, working these guys and working dope and working drugs, you can't just be Joe Friday. That's not going to work. You're going to have limited success throwing them in jail. So when you can roll with them and talk with them and be cool with them, that's where you're going to get something. And not everybody can do that.
How much of the graffiti that we see downtown here is from the gangs?
We don't have much graffiti, and that's a very good question. We have the Anti-Graffiti Task Force, which removes graffiti because graffiti attracts graffiti. So probably the graffiti that you don't see under bridges and things like that. I mean, as soon as we identify, we have a community resource officer, and he coordinates that now, so he photographs it and gets rid of it. So Missoula had a big graffiti problem in the 90s, if you remember, and really you won't see much graffiti here. And you look at Great Falls or Billings or Spokane. I mean, Spokane's bigger than us, but those other cities, you see a lot more graffiti there. It surprised me because as simple as it is to get this graffiti task force going, it's just a grassroots thing, and you get contractors to donate paint, and pretty soon there's some retired person that wants to roll with it. But graffiti, you got to get rid of that. And, you know, usually it's just tagging graffiti. It doesn't have, you know, if you want to see cool graffiti, go over there by the California Street Bridge. Dan Tavish lets the kids put their tags and up there on that wall. It's kind of cool, but most of it isn't gang related.
How many gangs do you know of here in town that actually started here in town?
There's 14. We've had 14 resident gangs, and you know, I'm not going to tell them by name because obviously by putting in, we're not going to put their names in the media because that just legitimizes them. So, you know, there's gang-related crimes that we don't report to the media as being gang-related because, again, they like that. They read the paper. They put the clippings up. They mail it to their homeboys in prison. They mail it back home. Look what I did. So we try not to do that. And so, you know, as she mentioned, you guys would have never known had she not been with street crimes that we're looking for a gang member from Spokane last Friday night who was in Missoula who was wanted on an attempted homicide for shooting somebody on January 6th. So, again, you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. So, you know, there's several incidents. I mean, it's not uncommon we have gang-related crime here. Is it rampant? No, but is it common? It's fairly common.
To what extent is there a homegrown gang presence on the reservations?
There is, you know, all the reservations, you know, all races of youth have involved themselves in gangs, and we do have a pretty good influence from Lake County. And I don't think they know how to deal with them. They don't have the numbers, but those kids, just like from Spokane and Yakima and Tri-Cities, I mean, they commonly come here to recreate. So, you know, some incidents at bars and stabbings and some aggravated assaults have been gang-related, but again, not reporting as that. So. I totally agree.
I mean, it sounds like you feel like it's important for the community to understand the presence of gangs, yet how do you reconcile keeping it out of the media and being able to get that across?
That's a good question. People usually ask, what can we do to help? And you haven't asked that question, so I'll answer two of them. Number one, what does it mean to have a gang problem be a community problem and not law enforcement? Well, there's 102 of us, and we can't be everywhere. There's 67,000 of you, and another 10 or 20,000 that are here during the daytime that don't live here. So, for example, you know your neighborhood. You know what's normal. You know what's not normal. When you see suspicious activity, call. I'll show you something real quick here. How many people came and knocked on your door last week to visit you?
They don't knock, they just walk in.
Okay, but non-family members, how many people came and knocked on your door?
Oh, probably 10?
10. I had none. How many did you have?
None.
How many do you have? You?
1.
Okay, so when you have that neighbor and you see multiple quick trips, they are selling drugs. If it's continuous.
We'll talk with you later.
If you think about it, if you don't see any activity, and then every Monday night it starts, and it's pretty consistent, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then there's really nothing, and then it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, if it's suspicious activity, it's probably criminal activity. And think about it, how many people come and knock on your door and visit you? And then think how many people pull up, go in for 2 minutes, come back out, and they don't do that unless they're doing drugs. So that's one example that maybe we won't see that. Another one is seeing somebody being suspicious in your neighborhood. If a police officer sees someone being suspicious and they think, that guy must be up to something, but we can't articulate a particularized suspicion to detain him, they don't have to talk to us. If you have the same feeling and you call 911 and say, there's a shady dude in my alley or there's a shady guy across the park, he just doesn't look right, now he's the focus of an investigation and we initiate contact with him and we have a lot more latitude to deal with him and he's not free to go. So getting involved in reporting things, and when you see graffiti and when you see suspicious activity and when you see 3 hypodermic needles next to your neighbor's garbage can, report it. Obviously JC and Jake Rosling is another city detective that works with JC. Call them. Call me. You know Rusty and Mark Muir now. You know Marty. You know Colin. You know us. That's a good thing for you is you guys get to meet police officers. So I can't stress enough to get involved. And sometimes that's tough to do. But think about this. We have a vested interest in our community. We don't have hoods here. We have neighborhoods. When you see your neighbor's 3rd grader throwing apples at cars, you're going to stop and tell him, Tommy, knock it off. Or you're going to tell his dad. You see some kids break a window and run off. You're going to call the neighbor and say, hey, I saw so-and-so's kid break your window. Because we have a vested interest. We have a sense of community. We don't want it to get where that's lost. And hopefully Missoula won't ever get there. But you know what? A point I didn't say, comparing ourselves to other communities has limited information or limited benefit. What you really need to look at is what we do in Missoula today will impact how Missoula will be 5 years from now. And what we did in Missoula 5 years ago is why we're where we're at today. If we wouldn't have done as a department what we did in the mid-90s, Missoula's right. Missoula's like many others, 65,000 people, and there's hundreds of other cities just like us that have gangs. And if our department chose not to respond the way they did and involve the community and we work together, it'd be a different place. We'd be sitting here today showing you dead kids laying in Missoula streets and be able to say, hey, this happens here, and hey, we lost the battle, and hey, we arrested this many. But that's not the case, and hopefully next year I can come back here and I can tell you the same thing again. It's only going to take one of you. One of you leave, the rest will what?
I was just going to say, we love information like that. Because if you're seeing this problem, chances are your neighbor across the street seeing the same problem. Like I said, it's a neighborhood problem. And we don't necessarily have to need your name. But there's a hotline, a Crime Stoppers line, and we get this information corroborated, and we rely on people's information because that's how we get a lot of our cases.
And think about this, you don't want to, maybe they're not doing that, I don't want to get somebody in trouble, but do you want drugs being dealt in your neighborhood where a shooting can go off, where your kids are going to be playing, where a drive-by shooting might happen, where somebody might come in and jack them? Home invasion robberies are happening pretty common here. Why do people go jack people with dope? Because they don't call the police. Would you not say that's happened multiple times per month in Missoula? People are getting guns and ripped. Because they don't call the police. So you don't want that activity going around in your neighborhood anyway. Thanks, you've been great.
Thank you, guys.